Good morning, West Metro. Would you stand and worship with us this morning?
Nothing can separate, even if I ran away. Your love never failed. I know I still make mistakes, but you have new mercies for me every day. Your love never failed. Sing, you stay the same through the ages. Your love never changes. There may be pain in the night, joy comes in the morning. And when the my good. You make all things work together for my good. You make all things work together for my good. You make all things work together for my good. You're the God who makes the giants fall. You bring down the walls of Jericho. You're the God who gives the miracle. We believe. You're the God who parts the ocean wide, just to bring us closer to your side. You're the God who brings the dead to life. We believe, we believe. God, how great you are, great things you have done. For everything we've seen, there is more to come. And every victory, every battle won. For everything we've seen, there is more to come. We are confident in all your ways, 'cause we know you never make mistakes. God, you fill us with a greater faith. We believe. God, how great you are, great things you have done. For everything we've seen, there is more to come. For every victory, every battle won. For everything we've seen, there is more to come. God, how great you are, great things you have done. For everything we've seen, there is more to come. Every victory, every battle won. For everything we've seen, there is more to come. All of our hope in, all of our trust in, all of our future in the God who never fails. All of our faith in, all of our strength in, all of our future in the God who never fails. All of our hope in, all of our trust in, all of our future in the God who never fails. All of our faith in, all of our strength in, all of our future in the God who never fails. All of our hope in, all of our trust in, all of our futures in
tombs, and the angels stood in awe, for the souls of all who'd come to the Father are restored. And the church of Christ was born, and the Spirit lit the flame. This gospel truth of old shall not kneel, shall not fade. By His blood and in His name, in His freedom I am free. For the love of Jesus Christ, who has resurrected me. Praise the Father, praise the Son, praise the Spirit, three in one. God of glory, majesty, praise forever to the King of Praise the Father, praise the Son, praise the Spirit, three in one. God of glory, majesty, praise forever to the King of Kings. Oh, how high would I climb mountains if the mountains were where you hide? Oh, how far I'd scale the valleys if you graced the other side. Oh, how long have I chased rivers from lowly seas to where they rise, against the rush of grace descending from the source of its supply. I'll sing through the shadows my song of ascent. Whatever I walk through, wherever I am, your name can move mountains wherever I stand. And if ever I walk through the valley of death, I'll sing through the shadows my song of ascent, my song of ascent.
Father, would that be our prayer this morning? That we walk through the valleys, but when we walk through the valleys, we sing. Because we know there's more to come. We know that what you did on the cross saved us for eternity. Move in this place this morning. We love you, and it's in your son's name we pray. Amen.
Well, good morning, West Metro. Morning. So if you didn't know, our youth group had DNOW weekend, or Disciple Now weekend. So that's why you see some of our students, some of our people here wearing this DNOW shirt. And it was just a great weekend. And let me tell you, these are the times, especially when we get to be a part of something really cool where we set aside all the distractions and really just focus in on God and what he has in store for us this weekend. And that's what our students did this weekend, is they really honed in on the message that we got to hear. So we had a guest speaker, his name is Ben Woodson, and he really just walked us through a really, really cool topic this weekend. And our students not only learned a lot, but they also got to fellowship with one another. So we played some really fun games. One of them that we had never done before was this thing called Nerf Assassin. Okay, and so basically what happened was we had a couple people blindfolded and with Nerf guns, and then everyone else was wearing these necklaces with jingle bells on them. And basically the assassins were trying to, while blindfolded, shoot them with a Nerf gun, and it was pretty intimidating for some of our students. And let me just tell you, also, it's just funny because with some of our students, it's like, wow, like I didn't know you had that in you. Because, for example, we had Kai, he was one of the people that was one of the Nerf assassins, and he was blindfolded and walking around, and I mean, it was almost like he was in this whole new element. And he, without a beat, ran out of ammunition with one of his cartridges and dropped the empty one, picked up the full one in his pocket, and loaded it without taking the blindfold off. And at that moment, I thought, you are Ron Duke's son. That is so true. So you've got Kai, and then we've got, then we had like Sydney and Clara, and let me just tell you, I don't know if I would want to go to a gun range with y'all, because they would get reloaded in their Nerf guns, and then they'd go pop, pop, pop. I mean, they would just unleash it. There was no waiting. They would just unload the whole cartridge right there. And so I don't think we're ever going to have a youth trip to the gun range or anything like that. So I'm just telling you, we're going to stick to Nerf gun, to the Nerf assassin. But we had a great time. We also went to Incredible Pizza where they got to play games and eat. And we also got to do a service project here at the church. And so I'll let Shelley come up here and kind of talk about that a little bit.
I asked Parker, I said, please thank yourself and the youth, and he didn't feel comfortable bragging on himself. So I said, I don't mind bragging. We had Jacob's Cupboard last week, and I just want to thank each one of you that supported that came, all the food, all the donations. I want to thank Steve, oh, he's not back there anymore, Stephen, there you are, for setting up and staying through the second act, and Diana for coming and singing. It was wonderful. Our son would be very humbled by all the outpouring of love and support. So we get all this food, and it's in the back room, and we have to put it away. First, we have to go through and check the expiration date, and then we put it into categories, and then we have to find a home for it in that room. So Parker called and said, hey, can our youth group do that? And I was so thrilled. When we got here yesterday afternoon, you guys had taken all the expired food and gotten rid of it, and then you put it in categories so that when we came in, all we had to do was just put it away. And so I want to thank Parker for being so supportive of our ministry, and I want to thank the youth for the great job you did.
Yeah. Thank you, Shelley.
Brag on yourself.
And on that note as well, weekends like DNOW, they can't happen with just one person. It takes all of us doing that. And so it takes our students, it takes our youth leaders, our sponsors. So we had Lisa and Jacob and Lizzie and Stephen, and then our host homes with the Eccles and the Larsons. So I just want to say, from me, I thank each and every one of you for being a part of Disciple Now Weekend, because it's just a great time for us to get together and to learn a lot. And these are the things that, as you grow up and then you get out of the youth, like, you'll remember these times and these moments. And God can use things that you learn this weekend now and in the future. So don't ever take these weekends for granted. Don't ever take camps for granted. Don't ever take even Wednesday nights or Sunday mornings for granted, because the Lord can use those things to continue the work that He's established in your life. And so this morning, I'm going to kind of recap what our guest speaker, Ben, went through this weekend. And so our theme this week was Let's Go. Let's Go. And what Ben walked us through was three people in the Old Testament, and how God called them to something and how they responded. So each session we looked at one character, and we looked how God called that person and then his response to the Lord. And there's some bad things that we can learn from them, some things that we wouldn't want to do, and then there's some good things that we can learn from them. And so we'll be in a few different places today. So if you would, the first place we'll be is in Jonah. So if you want to turn to the book of Jonah, we'll be in chapter 1. And this is a story that I'm sure a lot of us in here have heard since we were a young child. It's a story of Jonah and the big fish. And what was really just awesome about this weekend is we had actually gone through Jonah before in a series last year, and this was just a really cool recap for us to look at it as well. But in Jonah chapter 1, we'll just look at the first 3 verses here. And so really, if you want to know about Jonah, is that he's this prophet that God called to go to the city of Nineveh, all right? And during this time, Jonah did not like the Ninevites, because they were people who attacked his people, and they were at odds with each other. And God was telling him, you need to go to these people and give them this warning, this message I'm going to give you. And so if you look here, it says in Jonah chapter 1, it says, so God had called him to go do that. But it says, but Jonah rose to flee to Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. He went down to Joppa and found a ship to go into Tarshish, so he paid the fare and went down into it, to go with them to Tarshish, away from the presence of the Lord. So God tells him to go to Nineveh, and you know where Tarshish is? It's in the opposite direction. Jonah is basically saying, I don't want to go do that, and not only do I not want to go do that, I'm going to go to the exact opposite way and to try to get away from you, God, because I don't want to do this at all. And why was that he wanting to do this? Because he didn't like these people. He hated these people. He didn't want them to come to know, to be saved by God, to be forgiven. And so what's really just interesting about Jonah is that he had this perspective, this view about a people that did not line up with God and his view for those people. When I was younger, I played upward basketball. And that was a thing in the 90s that a lot of kids did. And I did that for all like elementary school years from like 1st to 6th grade. And what was really just interesting about upward basketball that we would do at our church, my church then, they would try to make it really hyped up. And so they would turn off all the lights. And then we had a couple like lights on the balcony, and they would try to move them around like you were at an NBA game or something like that. And then they would play the serious song that the Chicago Bulls in the 90s will come out to, And so if you ever watched Michael Jordan back in the day, it was that same song in the background that we would run out to. And for us as little kids, like it was like our Super Bowl. Like doing upward basketball, like this was like every week, like you looked so forward to going to play upward basketball. And I mean, it was just a whole lot of fun. And I'll never forget one game that I wasn't the best basketball player, but I had a lot of energy as a kid. And I just remember one time, there was a time when the opposite team, there was a player coming across half court, and he started fumbling the ball. He started kind of losing the ball. So then there was a scramble with me and him trying to get the ball on the ground, and we were just kind of, little 3rd, 4th grade kids just trying to get the ball, and I finally got the ball. And so then I started running down the court with the ball, dribbling the ball, and people are yelling my name, and I mean, like, it was this movie moment for me, because I'm thinking I'm about to, score this basket. And I'll never forget, I look in the corner of my eye and I see my coach, and he's saying, and he's pointing that way and he's yelling my name. I realize I'm going the wrong way. I'm about to score on our own goal. And thank goodness I did not do. I stopped and picked up the ball, and he would just go the other way. And so thank goodness I did not score, because that would have been even more humiliating. But my coach was there to tell me, you're going the wrong way. This is not going to be good for you. You may have this vision in your mind, but it's not going to end up well for you. And so my perspective in that moment, because I was just tangled up with the ball, I was tangled up in trying to get my little moment of fame, and I ended up going the wrong way. And I just think of a story like that, and how for us as even believers, there are times in our life where we can do that as well. Where God tells us to do something, and we have our own beliefs and opinions. We have our own agendas and things. And God tells us to do something, and we say, no, I'm going the other way. I'm going the other way. And that's exactly what Jonah did. And so as Ben was sharing about Jonah, what I really liked is he talked about how for us as believers, we need to think about people the way that God sees and thinks about people. That it went beyond Jonah's opinions and his thoughts for the Ninevites, but it was about a people who were truly lost, who did not know him. But he wanted to save them despite their sin. And so for us, really the question he kind of pointed to was, are there any people in your life that would be your Ninevites, the people that you would hate to have to go to? And if you don't really have people like that, you're like, well, I don't really hate people. I mean, that's the category that I kind of fell in, is I don't really have hate for really anybody, I think. But he took it a step further, and then he said, what about your indifference towards people? And that's when it really set in for me and a lot of our students and even adults, because indifference is something that I found in my life, where you just, well, this person over here, I don't really talk to him, or I don't really talk to her, and we live separate lives, and that's okay. That's okay. And that's where we fall in, I think, a lot of times as believers. And I think maybe for you, you don't have a person maybe you hate, but maybe there's a person or people that you just are indifferent about. And the truth is that God has called us to love all people. It's not just good enough to say, well, I don't hate anybody, that's fine. As long as I don't hate anybody, that's okay. No. God has commanded us, Jesus has commanded us to love all people, to love our enemies, to love the people we're indifferent about. And so that was the first call for us that we got to see in Jonah's life, was for him, that there were people that he didn't want to go to, but God saw them as people who were truly lost. And even at the end of the book, he is sitting on that hill and has that plant, that was giving him shade, and then God sends a worm to eat up the plant. And Jonah gets really mad about it. And God has to teach him a lesson again and say, you were so upset about this plant that you didn't work for, that you did not labor for. Should I not pity the people of Nineveh even more? And I mean, we don't know exactly his response at the end of the book, but you can just imagine for Jonah having to understand again, I had the wrong perspective. I had the wrong view. And so, church, I think for us this morning, we can really have that same question: is what is our view of people, and does it align up with God's view for people? Are my views that I'm indifferent? And if so, then God is calling me to love those people I'm indifferent about. And so that was the first thing we got to talk about with Jonah. And then on Saturday morning, last morning, we got to go through our second person, which was Moses. And Moses is my favorite Old Testament character in the Bible. And I just love his story. I'll tell you, I remember watching the animated movie Prince of Egypt as a kid, and that was so great. And I mean, it's not historically and biblically accurate 100%, but the music in it and the characters and everything else, it's great. And so I just, always think of that movie as a kid as well. So if you just want to be able to jump back to Exodus chapter 4, and we'll have the verses here on the screen, obviously. But this was about Moses and how God called him to do something great. And what I love about Moses is that he's this guy that was somebody, all right? Well, really, at the beginning, he was not really anybody. And then he becomes somebody, and then he gets humbled again, and he's really just an ordinary guy. And what I mean by that is, as a baby, he was an Israelite, and the Pharaoh was slaughtering the newborn children. But his mom rescued him and put him on the Nile River, and he was delivered to, oddly enough, Pharaoh's daughter. And so he grows up as a prince of Egypt, you could say, as one of them. And then he ends up murdering one of the taskmasters that was beating one of the Israelites. He ends up murdering the guy. And then he has to run away. And that's where he meets Jethro, and he becomes the shepherd. And so he really does. He was really nobody. He became somebody, and then he just becomes an ordinary guy. And at this time, he's an old guy. He's 70 plus years old. So he's thinking, I'm just going to live out the rest of my days as a shepherd. But God had other plans. He had other plans for him. And so what happens is that he speaks to Moses through this burning bush, this bush that was on fire, but it wasn't withering. And what a great picture that was for the Israelites, is that that's who they were, that they were enslaved, they were engulfed, but they were not dead. And I just love that God uses a burning bush, even just as a symbol for his people. And so he calls Moses to go. And what does Moses do? He gives excuses. He actually gives a lot of them, a bunch of excuses. And we pick up here in verse 10 of chapter 4. And it says, "But Moses said to the Lord, O my Lord, I am not eloquent either in the past or since you have spoken to your servant, but I am slow of speech and of tongue." Then the Lord said to him, "Who has made man's mouth? Who makes him mute or deaf or seeing or blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now therefore go, and I will be with your mouth and teach you what you shall speak." But he said, "O my Lord, please send someone else." Then the anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses, and he said, "Is there not Aaron your brother, the Levite? I know that he can speak well. Behold, he is coming out to meet you, and when he sees you, he will be glad in his heart. You shall speak to him and put the words in his mouth, and I will be with your mouth, and with his mouth I will teach you both what to do. He shall speak for you to the people, and he shall be your mouth, and you shall be as God to him. And take in your hand the staff, in which you shall do the signs." Moses had excuses. He was afraid. He had all these reasons why not to go. And what Ben really talked about this weekend was when we give excuses, God gives solutions. When we give excuses, God gives solutions. And for Moses, it was one of those things to where he had to realize it wasn't about what he couldn't do, but it was about what God would do. It wasn't about what he couldn't do. It was about what God would do through him. So he was thinking about, I don't have the ability. I don't have the power. I don't have the influence. I don't have all this stuff. But it wasn't really about him. It was about God. And him using Moses to lead his people out of bondage, who had been in bondage for hundreds of years. And what I really like about this story is that Moses was the guy who had a really deep past. I mean, there's a lot of things that happened in his life. I mean, there was shame in his life. There's probably regret in his life. There are things that happened that he wished he probably could have taken back, that he would have never done. But God still chose him to lead his people. He still chose him to go to his people with a message. And so really for us this morning, church, you may find yourself this morning to where God's calling you to do something. He's calling you to a certain person or to do a certain thing, and we just have excuses. You just have excuses. I'm telling you is that God has solutions to your excuses. Doesn't mean that it's going to be easy. Doesn't mean that he's going to give you an itinerary, a blueprint of everything that's going to happen. But he's going to promise you that he's going to give you what you need to do what he's called you to do. And I found that in my life as a believer. There's been times in my life where things have happened and I ask God, I don't know what to do. And so one of the things was when I first came here to first time to West Metro. And I remember just kind of getting the information, and my friend Jeremy was telling me about West Metro, and he's like, "Hey, I think this could be really cool, really good for you." And so I was like, "Okay, I mean, I'll venture out and I'll look at it." And so I remember coming here on I don't know if it was Wednesday night, but it was one night, and it was Kelly and Steven. We just met here and we talked, and I mean, it was maybe a 30, 45-minute conversation, but I still remember that night where we talked and we got to share with one another. And I just remember leaving just really, really encouraged and just with a great feeling about West Metro. But there was still a hint of fear in my life because I had never really ventured out much of my church kind of bubble. And I didn't really know anybody at West Metro Community Church. And so I really had a lot to pray about and think about. But the Lord gave me a lot of peace about it. And one of the big things that I remember being afraid was, well, God, what if they don't like me? What if I come here and these people, I'm an outsider. What if I don't fit in? What if the pastor, what if the elders, what if they just are mean to me? Just things like that, where you're just thinking of all the things that can go wrong. But the Lord was faithful, and now I see, after being here for a little over 2 years, that God had people in store for me to help me do what He called me to do here, what He's called me to do here. That He knew, Parker, you can't lead this youth group by yourself. But I have people in place here who are going to encourage you. And they're going to be there for you. And I have these elders, these staff members, these youth workers in place for you that I'm going to bring, and they're going to help you do it. And so the Lord was faithful to find solutions to my excuses. And church, for us as believers, we have to ask ourselves, what are my excuses? What are the things that I'm saying, I'm not good enough to do this, or they'll never believe me if I say that? But are we honestly seeking the Lord and trusting in Him and understanding, God, I don't know what all the outcome's going to be. All I know is that You've called me to do this, and I'm going to do it. I'm going to trust You. Just like I did for the very first time with my life when You saved me, is I'm going to trust You just in the same way with this decision, with my life. And so that was the second session we got to talk about. And then the last thing was in Isaiah, in the person of Isaiah. So if you have your Bible, you can go to Isaiah chapter 6. And this is this vision that Isaiah got to see of the Lord. In Isaiah 6, this is verse 5. So Isaiah in this moment has this vision of the Lord, and he sees His glory. He sees Him in His glory. And so we pick up in verse 5, and Isaiah says, "Woe is me, for I am lost, for I am a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the people of unclean lips. For my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts." And one of the seraphim flew to me, having in his hand a burning coal that he had taken with tongs from the altar, and he touched my mouth and said, "Behold, this has touched your lips, and your guilt is taken away, and your sin atoned for." And then I heard the voice of the Lord saying, "Whom shall I send? And who will go for us?" And then I said, "Here I am, send me." So the first two examples, we see what not to do, really. We can see from Jonah and Moses what not to do in those times where God calls us to do something. But in Isaiah's case, we see what we should do. What we should do. And there's a lot of things to unpack out of this. But the first thing is that Isaiah experienced God's glory. He experienced God in a way that he had never done before. And in that moment, he was forever changed. And so, church, we asked our students the same question, was, when was a time that you experienced God? When was a time that you experienced God's glory in your life? Where he was just so real to you in that moment. You were so overwhelmed in that moment. Because those are the things and the moments that can really change us. And in those moments, we have to be like Isaiah and realize, I'm a sinful person. I'm a sinful person because I'm in the presence of a 3 times holy God, and I'm not. And in that moment, God restores Isaiah. He restores him. And really, what I love about this is that after he's been restored, God asks, who are we going to send? Who's going to go for us? Who's going to deliver this message? And he immediately volunteers. He says, "Here am I. Here I am. Send me." And what that basically was Isaiah putting his yes on the table, throwing it out there on the table to God. I think for us as people, we don't like doing that. If someone was to ask you, hey, you want to go out? Most of us are going to say, well, what are we going to do? When are we going to go? Who's going to be there? What time will we be back? Are we going to eat before? Are we going to eat there? I mean, like, we want to know all the information before we commit. I mean, am I speaking your language? Yeah. There's maybe a few things where you'll put your yes on the table for without any, conditions or anything like that. But a lot of times we want to know all the information before we commit as people. And I blame cable companies for that. I blame maybe even the insurance people for that because you want to know all the conditions before you sign up for something. So maybe we're just trained that way. But there are some things in my life where you can just say the word and I'll say, okay, sure, we'll figure it out as we go along, but I'm in. So if you were to say, okay, well, Parker, you know what, we're going to go to Chick-fil-A. I would say, okay, very good. Sounds like a plan. Or if you were to say, Parker, we're going to go see the Dallas Cowboys play. I would say, okay, great. Sounds like a plan. I'll be in there. I mean, like there are things like that where I really like doing it, and I would just tell you, okay, I'm in. Sounds like a plan to me. But it's not everything. I mean, a lot of times, even amongst friends and people at your work, we want to know all the information before we commit. But friends, that's not what God does for us all the time. He's not always going to give us the blueprint itinerary of everything that's going to happen. He just wants us to trust him. And he's not worried about your beliefs and your opinions. He's not worried about your shortcomings and your inabilities. We see with Isaiah, he's just looking for your availability. He's just asking, are you available for me? He's asking, are you willing to go for me? Are you going to trust me like you trusted me when you gave your life to me? That's what he's asking for. These guys we got to learn about this weekend, they were people who had past sins, messed up lives. They weren't perfect, but God still called them to go do these things. And so I'll close out with this, is what I really just thought about this weekend with Let's Go. And it really was about us being changed and then going out and sharing that good news with people in our lives. And we've challenged our students even before this weekend. That's kind of been a big thing for our youth group on Wednesday nights that we've really been honing in on, is really just sharing. Got to talk about how to share your testimony and how to share the gospel in a couple minutes and hear some verses and things like that. And this whole weekend, as I was thinking about this, it has made me think about a couple things. Is one, have you been delivered? And are you seeking those that haven't been? And it just makes me think back at the story of Moses, and you think about him. He's this old guy. Doesn't speak well. He's a shepherd. He's a nobody. That's what we would think. But here's the really cool thing when you really think about Moses, is that he had already been delivered in his life. When he was a baby, God delivered him from the hand of Pharaoh. He saved him and made sure that he went down the Nile without being consumed. He delivered him even when he had done something wrong and he had to flee for his life. He had to get out of Egypt. God delivered him. He had experienced deliverance. But there were people, his people, who had not. So he really was the perfect person for the job, because he knew the feeling of deliverance. And he was going to go to people who had never had that in their lives. And you can only imagine the desire that he would have for them to experience what he's experienced, that they would be back on that mountain to worship the Lord like he was. And they got to see God's glory and his power at work. And as I was thinking about that, there was a time in my life where really God's word and kind of my story and my testimony, it went from my head to my heart. And that was a big thing that we've really tried to focus in with our group this weekend, is that as we learn about God, that knowledge and what we learn doesn't stay up here, but it goes down to here as well. And that's where real change happens. Because if it stays all up in here, then we're no better than the Pharisees. We're puffed up with knowledge. We become spiritual hoarders, as my friend Tommy would say. We just like to collect nice things. But I remember my last couple years as being a teenager before I got into my 20s. And if you don't know, my story, a big part of my story is how my parents adopted me when I was a young child, when I was a baby, and raised me up. And so my whole family is Caucasian, is white, and then there's me. And so I always knew that I was adopted. I mean, even as a kid, even if they didn't, I mean, they told me that, but even as a kid, you would realize, me look at myself in the mirror and the rest of my family, something's a little off. But they were always so grateful to explain things to me and be patient with me, and, you know, if I had any questions and things like that. But as I got older, just before I got into my 20s, the gravity of what they did for me finally set into my life. Because I had known it before. It was all up in here, but it wasn't all in here. And when you realize that you've just really known something, but you really haven't known it though, man, it breaks your heart. It breaks your heart. And so I just remember being in my room one night, and I was just thinking about it, because, you know, it gets on your mind. You try to ignore it, you try to push it away, but it keeps popping back in your mind. And I remember just sitting there in my room and just thinking about, okay, before I came here, I was in an orphanage. Like I didn't have a family. I was separated from my family right now, thousands of miles away, a whole ocean away. And as I thought more about it, I realized, you know, my parents, they already had 4 kids of their own. Why did they feel like they needed me? I mean, what could I offer them as a baby? There's nothing that I could do to earn my place. There's nothing I could do to pay my way. And that really just hit me like a ton of bricks, because I just realized, wow, that was a huge thing that they did. And as the years have gone by, my love for my parents has grown, because I just see the depths of it more and more and more. And it really just is one of those things to where there are times when I think about what my life could have been if it wasn't for them. Because I don't know where I'd be right now if it wasn't for my parents, if it wasn't for the Lord. I don't think it would be right here. I don't know where I would be. And so I say that, church, because I've been delivered. And God gave me a great picture of what that deliverance looks like, personally. And so, for someone who's been delivered, I want to go and share that message of hope with people. And it was a big reason why I felt the Lord called me to do ministry, is because the most beautiful thing is to be able to see someone pass from death into life by the changing power of the gospel. To see someone be discipled, to grow in their faith, to become leaders in their church, to become people that God uses to go to the ends of the earth for Him. It's the most beautiful thing. It's the most miraculous thing. And so, church, I just ask you, have you been delivered? Has there been a time in your life where you placed your faith and trust in Jesus Christ as the Lord and Savior of your life? Where you said, God, I'm tired of trying to live life by my rules, but what I think is good. I know I'm a sinner. I know I'm separated from you. This sin that separates me from you. But I confess that to you, and I repent of that sin. I turn away from it, and I want to give my life and follow you. Has there been a time in your life where you have been delivered? And if you say, yeah, Parker, I've done that before. I have been delivered. Then the next question is for you. Are you seeking those that haven't been? Are you seeking those that haven't been delivered? People who don't have that hope, they don't have that love in their life. There are people who we were just like before we came to know the Lord. So my challenge and this kind of encouragement for us as I end is I don't know what God's calling you to do. All I know is that God is calling all of us to something. I mean, He says so in the Great Commission at the end of the book of Matthew. But in terms of for you individually, it may be a person that doesn't know Him that He's calling you to go and to share with and to befriend, to have a friendship with that you can then share the gospel with. It may be someone who knows the Lord, but they've strayed away and they're not walking with Him. And God wants to send you to that person. It may be a certain ministry or a certain place that God is calling you to go to share the good news of Jesus Christ. I don't know what it is for you. But in this moment, would you think about that person? Would you think about that place? Would you think about whatever it is and ask, what are my excuses? What's standing in the way of that? And once you recognize that, would you then be just like Isaiah and say, you know what, God? Here I am. Send me. I don't know what it's all going to look like. I don't know how it's going to all turn out, but I'm trusting in you because I've been delivered. I've experienced it, and I want other people to experience it as well. I'm going to ask the band to come back up, and we'll have a time of response. And so if you would, just go ahead and bow your head and close your eyes. And I just want you to know, I don't know where you're at. Only you and the Lord know that. I just want you to know that God loves you. Maybe you haven't heard that in a long time, but God really does love you. And if you don't know Him, His desire is that you would come to know Him. He's already paid the price for it. He's already given His Son for you. All you have to do is say, God, I turn from my sin, and I'm placing my faith in Jesus Christ, and I'm going to follow you. That's all it will take. So if that's you and you want to do that this morning, you can come find one of our adults in the back, and we would love to have that conversation with you. If you've already made that decision, would you take this time right now to begin to pray for that person that God's calling you to, or that place that God's calling you to go to? Whatever it is, that you do business with the Lord and understand that He's calling me to do these things, and I don't want to just give my excuses. but I want to be available. I want to be willing to go because I've been delivered, and I want other people to experience that as well. You can use our Connect link up here on the screen as well if you're watching on the live stream. But during this moment in this song, here's what I would really like us to do, to be a little bit different. As they're going to start singing, and I want you in this time to do business with the Lord and pray and think and have some time of reflection. And after you've done business with the Lord, you stand and you worship. That you stay in your seat, you talk with the Lord, you listen to whatever He's calling you to do. You have that time of response. And after that's done, I want you to immediately stand up and begin to worship. God, I thank you for this morning. I thank you for the opportunity to be a part of a DNOW. And Lord, I just pray for each and every one of us this morning. Is that the things that we've heard this morning and this weekend for our students, it would not just stay up in our head, but it would go to our heart. That we would really mean it. That we wouldn't just throw it away after this weekend. And that whatever you're calling us to do, we would say, here I am, send me, let's go.
In the darkness, we were waiting without hope, without light. Till from heaven you came running. There was mercy in your eyes to fulfill the law and prophets. To a virgin came the word, throne of endless glory, to a cradle in the dirt. Praise the Father, praise the Son, praise the Spirit, three in one. God of glory, majesty, praise forever to the King of Kings. To reveal your kingdom coming and to reconcile the lost, to redeem the whole creation. You did not despise the cross, for even in your suffering you saw to the other side, knowing this was our salvation. Jesus, for our sake you died. Praise the Father, praise the Son, praise the Spirit, three in one. God of glory, majesty, praise forever to the King of Kings. In the morning that you rose, all of heaven held its breath. For the stone was moved for good, and the Lamb had conquered death. And the dead rose from their tombs, and the angels stood in awe. For the souls of all who'd come to the Father are restored.